September 15th, 1942, 0847 hours, southern perimeter of Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The jungle stinks of rot and cordite. Lieutenant Yasuo Kojima can barely keep his legs beneath him as two Marines, boys really, maybe 19, 20, grip his arms and half carry him through trampled kunai grass, still slick with morning dew and yesterday's blood. His uniform hangs off him like a funeral shroud. 11 days since he's eaten anything but palm heart and rainwater. 16 since the banzai charge that left his entire company shattered across what the Americans now call Bloody Ridge. He waits for the blade. It's what he would do, what should be done. The Emperor's soldiers do not surrender. His father's Tanto sword, lost somewhere in the mud 3 kilometers back, was meant for his own belly, not this. Not the humiliation of stumbling into enemy lines with his hands raised and his spirit broken. The Marines don't speak. They just keep walking him forward, past sandbagged positions and leaning palm trunks, splintered by artillery. Kojima catches glimpses of other prisoners, 12, maybe 15 men from various units, all skeletal, all wearing the same expression of glazed inevitability. Some he recognizes. Captain Ishida, who'd led the assault on the Tenaru. Sergeant Nakamura, who'd bayoneted 3 Americans in hand-to-hand 2 weeks ago. Now they're all just waiting for the Americans to return the favor. Kojima's mouth is so dry his tongue feels like canvas. His vision tunnels. He's fairly certain he's about to collapse when the Marines deposit him onto a fallen log outside a camouflaged command tent. The earth seems to tilt. He focuses on his breathing. In, out, the way his kendo instructor taught him a lifetime ago in Osaka. A shadow falls across him. He looks up. A Marine sergeant, stocky, sunburned, with a jaw like a brick and eyes that have seen too much. The sergeant's holding something in his hand. Kojima's body tenses. This is it. But the sergeant doesn't pull a pistol, doesn't shout or spit. He extends his hand, and in it, a pack of lucky strikes. Kojima stares. His brain refuses to process the image, the green pack with its red circle target logo. The sergeant shakes it slightly, making the cigarettes rattle. An offering. The Marine's face is unreadable, weathered like old leather. But there's no hatred in it, no rage, just weariness, and something else Kojima can't quite name. One of the other prisoners, Private Tanaka, barely 18, makes a small, choked sound. The sergeant says something in English, then in broken, badly accented Japanese, "Tobacco, smoke." Kojima's hand trembles as it rises. His fingers, filthy, skeletal, close around a single cigarette. It feels impossibly clean, factory-made, American, the enemy's tobacco. The sergeant flicks open a Ziplo lighter. Kojima leans forward, inhales. The tobacco is smooth, rich, nothing like the harsh kinshi they'd been rationed on the troop ships. The smoke fills his lungs, and for just 1 second, one impossible second, he's not a defeated soldier waiting for execution. He's just a man with a cigarette. Around him, other prisoners are being handed cigarettes. Tanaka takes one with both hands, like receiving a sacred object. Captain Ishida, proud, unbreakable Ishida, who once told his men that surrender was worse than 1,000 deaths, stares at the lucky strike in his palm as if it's a grenade with the pin pulled. Then more Americans arrive. They're carrying canteen cups. Steam rises from them in the equatorial heat. Coffee. Real coffee. And behind them, a corporal with a field stove and a metal pan, dishing out something that smells like food. Actual food. Kojima's stomach, empty for so long, clenches violently. He can see chunks of meat, pink, glistening with grease, some kind of fried patty, bread, tinned peaches. The Marines are feeding them? Sergeant Nakamura, sitting 3 meters away, begins to shake. His cigarette falls from his lips. His face crumples. This hard man who'd killed without hesitation, who'd screamed banzai while charging machine gun nests, and he covers his face with his hands. He's crying, not from pain, not from fear, from something Kojima doesn't have words for. Because this isn't how it's supposed to work. In China, in Malaya, in the Philippines, prisoners were burdens, liabilities. The code was clear. The defeated had no honor, no rights. Kojima himself had marched past the bodies of Filipino soldiers left in ditches along the Bataan road. He'd looked away when officers executed Australian POWs too weak to work. That was war. That was the world. But this... The Marine sergeant presses a canteen cup into Kojima's hands. The heat of it against his palms is almost painful. He looks down at the dark liquid, sees his own reflection distorted on the surface, and he finally understands what that look in the sergeant's eyes was. Pity. Not contempt, not triumph, just human recognition of human suffering. Kojima brings the coffee to his lips. It's bitter and perfect and impossibly kind. When he swallows, something breaks inside his chest, something that's been holding him together since Bloody Ridge, since the charges and the screaming and the endless gnawing starvation. He doesn't cry, not yet, but his hands won't stop shaking. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a single question forms. Who are these Americans? The corporal with the field stove is named Eddie Kowalski, and his hands haven't stopped shaking since Bloody Ridge either. He'd been the one to find them in the wire, Japanese soldiers torn apart by Browning .30 cal fire, hanging in the barbed wire like broken puppets, some still alive, moaning in the darkness. He'd listened to them die over the course of an hour. Listened and done nothing because moving toward that wire meant getting your head taken off by a sniper. Now he's scooping Spam fritters onto tin plates for the same men who'd tried to kill him 6 days ago. It doesn't make sense. War isn't supposed to make sense, but this feels different, like someone changed the rules midway through and forgot to tell him which game they're playing anymore. Here. He hands a plate to one of the prisoners, an officer maybe, hard to tell with the rank insignia torn off and the man's collarbone jutting through his skin like a goat hanger. The Japanese soldier takes it with both hands, bows slightly, and Kowalski feels something twist in his gut. They bow, even now, even like this. Sergeant Bill Henderson, the one who'd handed out the lucky strikes, squats down beside Captain Ishida. The Japanese officer sits rigid, back straight despite obvious exhaustion, the canteen cup untouched in his lap. His eyes are fixed on some middle distance, his jaw clenched so tight Henderson can see the muscle jumping. "You gonna drink that or just look at it?" Ishida doesn't respond, doesn't blink. Henderson sighs, pulls out his own canteen, takes a long drink, then wipes his mouth. "Look, pal, I don't speak Japanese, and you probably don't speak English, but that coffee's gonna get cold, and you look like 40 miles of bad road, so drink the damn coffee." For a long moment, nothing. Then Ishida's hands, steady, controlled, lift the cup. He drinks. His eyes close. A tremor runs through him, barely visible, like a wire pulled too taut, finally releasing its tension. When he opens his eyes again, they're wet. Henderson looks away, gives the man that much. Private First Class James Wu watches from his position near the supply tent. Wu's parents came from Guangdong Province. He speaks Cantonese at home in San Francisco, grew up hearing stories about what the Japanese did in Nanjing, in Shanghai. His uncle's family disappeared when the Imperial army rolled through their village in '38. He should hate these men. He does hate them, or at least he hates what they've done, what they represent. The rising sun flag that flew over occupied China, over the burned-out hull of the Arizona, over his buddies' graves dug into Guadalcanal mud. But looking at them now, these hollow-eyed scarecrows who flinch at sudden movements and can barely hold a coffee cup, he can't find the hate. Can't find anything except a kind of tired disgust at the whole machinery of it all. One of the prisoners, the youngest one, suddenly lurches to his feet and vomits. The food was too much, too fast for a stomach that's been empty too long. The kid, can't be more than 17, drops to his knees, sobbing with shame. Wu moves without thinking. He grabs a canteen, wets a rag, walks over, and hands it to the boy. The Japanese private looks up at him with eyes like a beaten dog. Wu says nothing, just nods toward the rag. The boy takes it, wipes his mouth, whispers something in Japanese, probably thank you, probably something else, and Wu walks away before he has to think too hard about why his throat feels tight. Lieutenant Kojima finishes his coffee. The Spam fritter sits half-eaten on the plate beside him. His body can't handle more yet, but the coffee has done something. It's brought him back from whatever edge he'd been walking. He watches the Americans move among the prisoners with canteens and cigarettes and first aid supplies, and the cognitive dissonance is so severe it feels like vertigo. These are the same men who'd held Henderson Field against impossible odds, who'd shredded entire Japanese companies with artillery and machine gun fire, who'd fought with savage, unrelenting ferocity when the banzai charges came screaming out of the jungle in the pre-dawn darkness. Kojima had seen what Marine raiders did to Japanese positions. He'd walked through the aftermath of the Tenaru River battle. Hundreds of bodies, bloated in the tropical heat, cut down by interlocking fields of fire so precise it looked like an abattoir. The Americans were killers, efficient, brutal killers. So why this? Why the gentleness? Why the food and the coffee and the cigarettes? Beside him, Sergeant Nakamura has stopped crying but still hasn't touched his food. He's staring at his hands, hands that have killed, hands that tremble now with hunger and exhaustion and something deeper. They're trying to break us, Nakamura whispers in Japanese. A new kind of torture. Make us soft, then... No, Captain Ishida's voice cuts through, quiet but absolute. He's still holding his empty coffee cup. No, this is something else. What? Nakamura's voice cracks. What is it? Ishida doesn't answer for a long time. When he does, his voice is barely audible. I don't know. Across the compound, a marine photographer, Corporal Pete Martinez, raises his camera. He's supposed to document everything. Intelligence wants photos of enemy prisoners, condition reports, evidence of malnutrition and combat effectiveness degradation. He focuses his lens on the scene. Skeletal Japanese soldiers sitting in the shade, smoking American cigarettes, holding tin cups. Marines moving among them like medics, like human beings doing what human beings do when confronted with suffering. He clicks the shutter. The film will probably never be developed. Intelligence won't want these photos. They complicate things. War is simpler when the enemy stays the enemy. But here, in this makeshift prisoner compound on Guadalcanal, with the jungle pressing in and the smell of coffee mixing with gun oil and death, the enemy has a face, and he's crying over a Lucky Strike and a Spam fritter. Sergeant Bill Henderson didn't learn kindness from a manual. He learned it on December 8, 1941, in a Navy hospital in Pearl Harbor, pulling burned sailors out of oil-slicked water. He'd watched an 18-year-old kid from Nebraska die calling for his mother, his skin coming off in his hands like wet paper. He'd smelled burning fuel and burning flesh and burning everything, and somewhere in those hours he'd made a choice about what kind of man he'd be when, if he got the chance to pay it back. The payback came at the Tenaru, at Bloody Ridge. He'd killed his share of Japanese soldiers and slept fine afterward because they'd come to kill him first, and that's how the world works. But prisoners are different. Prisoners are defeated, helpless. And what you do to helpless people, that says something about who you are when nobody's watching, when there's no referee, no rules, no consequences except the ones you carry inside your own head for the rest of your life. So Henderson hands out cigarettes and coffee because the alternative is becoming something he won't recognize in the mirror. It's not mercy, it's self-preservation. Private Danny Ortega sits cross-legged in the dirt, sharing a cigarette with a Japanese private who speaks exactly 3 words of English. "Thank you, Joe." The prisoner says it over and over. "Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe." His eyes are wet and he keeps bowing his head, and Ortega doesn't know what the hell to do with it, so he just nods and says, "Yeah, buddy, yeah." Ortega's best friend, Martinez, different Martinez, not the photographer, died at Bloody Ridge with a Japanese bayonet in his chest. Ortega had been 10 feet away, couldn't get there in time, heard Martinez screaming his name, and couldn't get there in time. He should hate this prisoner, should want to hurt him the way Martinez was hurt. But looking at this skeletal kid who probably has a mother in Tokyo or Osaka waiting for a letter that'll never come, what's the point? Martinez is still dead. Hating the scarecrow won't bring him back. So Ortega shares his cigarette and tries not to think too hard about any of it. The officer in charge of the prisoner detail is First Lieutenant Robert Fowler, Annapolis, 38, originally slated for battleship duty until the Navy decided the Marines needed more infantry officers. He's 26 and looks 40. 3 months on Guadalcanal will do that. Fowler stands outside the command tent with his company commander, Captain Tom Whitaker, watching the scene unfold. "You know, intelligence is going to want to interrogate them," Whitaker says, lighting a cigarette of his own. "Let 'em eat first," Fowler replies. "They're not going anywhere, and they're not going to tell us anything useful in this condition anyway." Whitaker nods slowly. "Regiment's not going to like the photos. Then regiment doesn't need to see the photos." "Fair enough." Whitaker takes a long drag, exhales. "You hear about the Australian report?" Fowler's jaw tightens. "Which one?" "Singapore. Japanese took about 80,000 prisoners when the city fell. Allied soldiers, civilians. Word is they're using them as slave labor. Starvation rations, beatings, executions for minor infractions. The ones who survive are building a railway in Burma, dying by the hundreds." Fowler says nothing. "And then there's Bataan," Whitaker continues, his voice flat. 60,000 Filipino and American POWs force-marched 60 miles in the heat. No food, no water, Japanese guards bayoneting anyone who fell behind. Buried men alive. 7, maybe 10,000 dead before they even reached the camps. "I know," Fowler says quietly. "So explain to me why we're feeding these bastards Spam and coffee." Fowler watches a Marine, Kowalski, help one of the prisoners to his feet, steadying him when his legs buckle. Watches the Japanese soldier bow, shaking, and Kowalski wave it off awkwardly. "Because we're not them," Fowler finally says. Whitaker laughs, a bitter, exhausted sound. "That's it? We're the good guys, so we play by different rules?" "No, we play by our rules, the ones we decide, not the ones they force on us." Fowler turns to face his captain. "The Geneva Convention says..." "The Japanese didn't sign the Geneva Convention. But we did, and that means something. Has to mean something. Otherwise, what the hell are we fighting for?" Whitaker stares at him for a long moment, then shakes his head. You're either the best officer I've ever served with or the most naive. Haven't decided which. Probably both, sir. Despite everything, Whitaker almost smiles. Probably. What the Marines don't know, what they can't know yet, because the intelligence reports are still being compiled, still being verified, still too horrific for most people to believe, is that 3 of the Japanese officers sitting in their compound have direct experience with Allied prisoners. Captain Ishida was a logistics officer in the Philippines. He'd helped organize the Bataan March. Hadn't personally killed anyone, just signed requisition forms and coordinated transport schedules. But he'd seen it. The columns of defeated Americans and Filipinos stumbling north, the bodies left in the ditches. He'd told himself it was necessary, efficient, the Emperor's will. He'd believed it. Lieutenant Kojima had been stationed outside Singapore for 6 weeks after the city fell. He'd walked past the prisoner camps, seen the conditions, heard the stories. A British officer had escaped once, made it almost a kilometer before being dragged back. They'd executed him in the town square, made the other prisoners watch. Kojima had been there, part of the security detail. He'd looked away, but he'd been there. And Sergeant Nakamura, hard, unbreakable Nakamura, had served in China, had participated in pacification operations, had done things he tells himself were orders, were necessary, were war. Now they sit in American captivity, drinking American coffee, eating American food, treated with a basic human decency that they... The cognitive dissonance is crushing. Ishida sets down his empty cup with hands that won't stop trembling. He thinks about the Filipino soldier who'd begged for water on the Bataan Road. Ishida had walked past him. Everyone had walked past him. The man had died there in the dirt, and Ishida had filed a report about efficient prisoner movement and slept fine that night. Now a Marine, the enemy, has given him coffee, has fed him, has treated him like a human being. The shame is so enormous it feels like drowning. Beside him, Kojima is bent forward, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. His shoulders shake silently. And Nakamura? Nakamura is staring at the young Marine who'd helped him when he'd vomited. The Chinese-American private who'd given him a rag and a canteen and walked away. Nakamura had killed Chinese soldiers, Chinese civilians, a village near Nanjing. Orders, reprisals, war. He can still see their faces. Now a Chinese-American Marine has shown him mercy. The universe makes no sense. The war makes no sense. Everything he believed about the Americans, about the enemy, is collapsing like a building with its foundation removed. They were supposed to be soft, decadent, weak, barbarians who didn't understand honor or sacrifice or the warrior's code. But this is something deeper than honor. This is humanity. And it's breaking these Japanese soldiers more completely than any bullet or bomb ever could. Private Tanaka, the youngest, finally speaks. His voice is hoarse, barely a whisper. Why are they doing this? No one answers him, because none of them know. And that not knowing is the most terrifying thing of all. Outside the tent, Sergeant Henderson and Private Wu pull security. They can't hear the interrogation, but they watch Kojima emerge 20 minutes later, flanked by 2 Marines who guide him back toward the prisoner compound. The Japanese officer is crying openly now, not the silent trembling from before, full, racking sobs that shake his entire skeletal frame. Should we? Wu trails off, uncertain. Henderson shakes his head. Let him walk it off. Whatever he said in there, he's got to live with it. You think he gave them anything useful? Probably gave him everything. Henderson lights another cigarette. Wouldn't you? Put yourself in his shoes. Starving, beaten, expecting execution. Then the enemy feeds you, treats you decent, asks you a few questions. Yeah, I'd talk. Wu considers this. Is that why we're being nice? Interrogation tactic? I don't think so. I think Fowler actually means it. The playing by our rules thing? Henderson exhales smoke. But if it gets us intelligence that saves marine lives, I'll sleep fine either way. Doesn't feel right, though, does it? Nothing about this goddamn island feels right, Wu. We're just trying to get home with our souls intact. By noon, all 15 prisoners have been processed through interrogation. The intelligence haul is significant. Unit designations, supply conditions, command structure, defensive positions. The Japanese soldiers, confronted with basic human decency after weeks of hell, crack open like eggs. Lieutenant Fowler reviews the reports in the command tent, and the picture they paint is grim. The Japanese forces on Guadalcanal are collapsing. Not from lack of courage, they'd proven their willingness to die, but from simple logistics. No food, no medicine, no reinforcements. The Tokyo Express runs supplies at night, but it's not enough. Never enough. They're eating their dead. Fowler had thought Kojima was exaggerating, but 3 other prisoners confirmed it independently. Japanese soldiers, so hungry, they're carving meat from corpses in the jungle. Christ, Captain Whitaker says, reading over Fowler's shoulder. And we thought we had it bad. Fowler sets down the report. Through the tent flap, he can see the prisoner compound. Most of the Japanese soldiers are sleeping now, curled up in the shade, bellies full for the first time in weeks. Guards posted, but no restraints. Where would they run? And in their condition, how far would they get? Sir, Fowler says quietly, permission to request additional medical supplies for the POWs. Some of them have infections that need treatment, and we should probably get them on a controlled refeeding protocol before they eat themselves sick. Whitaker studies him. You know what they did to our guys, Bataan, Singapore? Yes, sir. And you still want to waste medical supplies on them? Not waste, sir. Use. There's a difference. Fowler meets his captain's eyes. We start acting like them. What's the point? We become the thing we're fighting. Pretty speech, Lieutenant. You practice that? No, sir. Just trying to figure out how to stay human. Whitaker is quiet for a long moment. Then he nods. Request approved. But you clear it with the corpsmen first. Our boys get priority. The Japs get whatever's left. That's non-negotiable. Understood, sir. And Fowler. Sir. The photos don't leave camp. The reports go up the chain sanitized. Intelligence only. No color commentary about cigarettes and coffee and feelings. The folks back home are not ready for nuance. They need enemies they can hate. We give them that. Fowler's jaw tightens, but he nods. Yes, sir. Because that's the other war they're fighting. Not just the one in the jungle with bullets and grenades, but the one back home in movie theaters and newspapers. The war where the enemy has to stay the enemy. Where there's no room for Japanese soldiers crying over Spam fritters, no space for the complicated truth that humans remain human even when they're trying to kill each other. That war requires simplicity. This war, the real one, the one happening in the mud and blood and exhausted kindness, is anything but simple.
क्या आपने कभी महसूस किया है कि दिन खत्म होने से पहले ही आपकी तवानाई खत्म हो जाती है? वो जोश, वो चमक, वो तवानाई जो कभी आपकी पहचान हुआ करती थी, वो कहाँ गुम हो गई? दिन भर का काम, जिम्मेदारियां और तनाव, ये सब मिलकर आपके अंदर की रोशनी को मांद कर देते हैं। लेकिन यकीन जानिए, ये रोशनी कभी बुझती नहीं, सिर्फ धीमी पड़ जाती है। और इसे फिर से रोशन करने का राज छुपा है कुदरत के इस खूबसूरत तोहफे में, जो ना सिर्फ आपको अंदर से मजबूत बनाएगा, बल्कि हर रात आपको एक नई सुबह जैसा एहसास दिलाएगा। सच तो ये है कि हमारा जिस्म और कुदरत का रिश्ता बहुत गहरा है। जब हम इस रिश्ते को नज़रअंदाज कर देते हैं तो तवानाई में कमी, सुस्ती और बेचैनी हमारा मुकद्दर बन जाती है। हमारे बुजुर्ग इस राज को जानते थे। وہی وہ نسخے، وہی جڑی بوٹیاں جو سردیوں کی راتوں میں ہمارے گھروں میں خوشبو اور توانائی بکھیرا کرتی تھی۔ اور آج سائنس بھی اس بات کی تصدیق کرتی ہے کہ یہ قدرتی اجزاء نہ صرف ہمارے مدافعتی نظام کو مضبوط بناتے ہیں بلکہ ہمارے ہارمونز کو متوازن رکھتے ہوئے توانائی کے بحران کو ختم کرتے ہیں۔ تو آئیے آج ہی سفر کا آغاز کریں۔ اپنے آپ سے ایک وعدہ کریں کہ آپ اپنی صحت کو سب سے پہلی ترجیح دیں گے۔ میں آپ کو وہ سادہ پرانے وقتوں کے آزمودہ نسخے دکھانے والی ہوں جو آپ کے خون کے بہاؤ کو تیز کریں گے، آپ کے نظام انہضام کو درست کریں گے اور آپ کی نیند